So welcome everyone. My name is Lynne Reeder. I'm the National Lead for the Australian Compassion Council, and I'm pleased to welcome Hugh Mackay, psychologist, well-known author, and importantly in this context, the National Ambassador for the Charter for Compassion in Australia. So this conversation was taking place as part of the 2022 National Day of Compassion, and our theme for this year is deep listening. As together we deep dream Australia, a continent for compassion. So Hugh, thank you so much for joining me today.
Great pleasure. Thank you very much, Lynn. I must say, there could not be a better theme than deep listening at a time like this in our social history.
That's right. And so, in fact, you've written on listening and the importance of listening. So I was going to start with just that basic question of, what is deep listening?
Well, it is the core question, and I think to answer it, we just need to take a step back, as we always should in discussions about human relationships, and just begin by reminding ourselves of what it actually means to be human, just to remind ourselves that we belong to an essentially social species. We are connected, whether we like the idea or not. We exist in a kind of shimmering, vibrating web of interconnectedness. We're born to cooperate. That's the kind of species we are. We need groups, communities to sustain us and support us and so on. We need each other. That's what it means to be human. And that's why we say that the sense of belonging is absolutely fundamental to the mental and emotional health of a member of this species. And deep listening, or being listened to deeply, being listened to attentively and empathically, is possibly the most potent symbol we ever have of the fact that we belong, that we are being taken seriously, we're being acknowledged, we're being attended to. Nothing says that like being listened to.
And so you're mentioning then the importance of us as a social species. So in what ways does deep listening bring us closer to others?
Well, let's think about what listening actually entails. When we listen deeply, and deep is a lovely word to describe this, not just casual listening, someone says, what time is it? That's not we don't have to get into deep water there. But if we're listening attentively, if we're listening empathically, what we're actually doing, and this is probably a good definition of deep listening, we're entertaining someone else's ideas. We're mentally and emotionally changing place with another person. And nothing more eloquently demonstrates that we're taking them seriously, even if we don't like what we're hearing. That's a separate question. We can talk about arguments and disagreements. But at the point where we're listening, the reason why it brings us so close together is that it shows the other person that we are entertaining their ideas regardless of whether we're ultimately going to agree or disagree. And notice, just as a sort of footnote to that, Lynn, that when we don't listen attentively and empathically to another person, when we don't offer the gift of deep listening, what we're actually saying to another person is, look, I'm sorry, I don't take you seriously enough to bother listening to you. Well, you'd never say that to a partner or a child or a colleague or a friend or a neighbour. And yet when we withhold the gift, the therapeutic gift of listening, that's actually what we're saying.
Yes, and in our world, we're becoming ever more polarised and finding it harder to listen to each other. So why do you think that happens? Why are we seemingly getting less better at listening to each other?
Well, listening is always a struggle for humans, but it's a particular struggle at this point, I think, in our social evolution, because we have become such an individualistic society. We've become so almost obsessed with me the so-called me culture has emerged. It's all about me, my entitlements, my identity, my gender, my ethnicity, my religion, whatever it is, at the expense of our sense of ourselves as sharing a common humanity. Well, listening breaks through all that. Listening says, just for the moment, it's not about me, it's actually about you. So there are a few very obvious reasons why we find that hard to do at any time, but especially at a time like the present. In fact, it's fair to say that for human beings, talking is a lot easier than listening because talking is all about me. I'm saying what I think. Terrific. Listen in. Whereas listening is saying, no, I'll just take a backward step. Now, that's hard for us because it's actually risky. And the risk that we run when we listen is that we might have to change our mind in response to what we hear. And no one likes having to change their mind. But in fact, if you're not running the risk of changing your mind in response to what you hear, then you're not really listening. So that's why it is hard work. There are a couple of other reasons, though, Lynn. I think one is just a physiological reason, and that is that we can think much more quickly than we can talk. People have tried to measure how quickly we think, and of course we don't always think in words. But if we're thinking in words, most of us can think at a speed of around 450 or 500 words a minute, and most of us speak at the rate of about 125 words a minute. So when we're listening to someone, there's an enormous amount of excess capacity and tremendous potential to be distracted and to be thinking, oh, well, I can listen to this person at the same time I can try to think, what are we going to have for dinner tonight? Or wonder what that person meant when they said that to me. So we've got a lot of mental capacity available, which we need to learn how to, I mean, part of deep listening is learning how to harness all of that potential so that we're focused exclusively on what the other person is saying and not just the words, but we're thinking actively about their tone of voice, about the look on their face, about their posture, about their gestures. So there's a lot going on when someone's talking to us. And if we really focus on everything, all aspects of that great package that someone is offering us when they talk to us, we can soon use up all that thought speed. The other reason why, and I suppose this in a way is the most fundamental reason, Lynn, why we find it hard to listen, is that all of us exist within the framework of what I like to think of as a kind of psychological cage. You're in one, I'm in one, everyone who's listening to us is in one. And these cages are things that we construct for our own protection. Ever since we were little kids, we've been making decisions about the world. We've been developing knowledge, attitudes, values, beliefs, expectations, and so on. And they're like bars in our personal cage. We're protected, we're cocooned by the fruits of our own experience. We're comforted by the things we have come to believe. Now, that's terrific for our personal psychological health, but it's not good news for listening, because when we listen, we tend to filter what we're hearing through the bars of our cage. When we look at something that's going on, when we listen to a speech or when we listen to a conversation, we tend to do it from inside the comfort and the security of our own cage. And so we don't see what's out there. We don't hear what's being said. We see it and we hear it through the filter of our existing prejudices, our existing attitudes, beliefs, expectations, and so on. You tend to see what you're looking for. You tend to hear what you're listening for. And deep listening cuts right across that and says, at this moment, the gift I'm going to give you when I listen attentively and empathically is this. I'm going to step outside the comfort and security of my own cage, and I'm going to try to imagine what it must be like to be in your cage. It's like It's a bit like trying on a coat. You know, if there was a coat hanging on a peg on the wall over there, and I said to you, "Hey, Lynn, try on the coat," and you said to me, "Oh no, look, I think that wouldn't suit me. It just wouldn't fit. It's just not my style." I
Mm.
think I'd be entitled to say, "Well, hang on. Why don't you go over there and take the coat off the peg and try it on, and then tell me if it fits?" Um, well, that's exactly what deep listening is like. It's like walking over there, taking the coat off the peg, trying it on, actually trying it on, actually
So
entering
that's,
into the cage of the other person, and then
yeah.
deciding whether we agree or disagree.
So it takes courage then. You know, there's a depth of emotional courage required to actually, you know, as you say, step out of your cage, you know, in
Yes.
terms and take that protection away from you. Yeah. So I'm
Yes.
just wondering then, Hugh. Oh,
I think
sorry.
that, by the way, an extremely good word. I think it is deep listening. What we're talking about today
Mm,
is a courageous. It's generous, but it's also courageous.
mm, mm. Yeah. So then I wonder then to finish up here with what are this one thing that we could be doing on the National Day of Compassion on the 21st of September to actually improve our connections with others through this gift of deep listening.
Yes, well, this day is a wonderful opportunity to practice the discipline of stepping outside our cage. I would say the one thing we can do to make a huge difference to the quality of communication, the quality of discourse, and the quality of our relationships is on this day, whenever we hear someone saying something that annoys us or irritates us or challenges us or that we know we couldn't agree with, that's the moment to try listening. Now let me pretend pretend that I am that person. Actually try out what it must feel like to be the person who's saying something that I don't like the sound of. I'm not going to have any trouble when this experiment is over returning to my cage and saying I couldn't buy that. Maybe, but maybe I'm not. Maybe I'm going to go back and say, hello, I need to remove a few bars from my own cage in the light of what I've just heard. But use the moment of when we bristle, when we can feel that we're going to disagree or object to what someone is saying, use that moment as the trigger for saying, now I've got to rise to this challenge. I've got to find the courage to actually entertain these ideas.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Hugh. That's a great suggestion for everyone, and we certainly hope that they will engage in that. We're engaging Australians across our continent to do that deep listening. Thank you so much. Thank you, Hugh.
Great pleasure. Thank you, Lynn.